Well, all right, ready?
Yep.
Game face.
Ready.
When John's done talking.
Interrupting.
Yeah.
Not
Is
true.
he good?
This is GRL Law, the podcast where the GRL team tells you why they're different. Who the hell are they? Why should you want them fighting for you? The industry leader in law with over 180 years of combined experience. This team is here to shed light on crucial topics in law to keep you aware and informed, because it comes back to the primary point. We give a damn.
Well, welcome to Season 2, Episode
9.
9. Episode 9. We don't have a title for it yet, but we are going to talk about everything related to trash, trespass, and telephones.
Yep.
The triple T's.
The triple T's.
Triple T's. And you found, Ms. Donut, the single best current event that we could do to lead into this topic.
Yeah, if the crimes alleged weren't so terrible, this might be our guy. He's hitting several of the legal issues that we've talked about quite often on this podcast and behind the scenes.
All of them. I mean, we probably should have saved this one for the last episode because it brings the year full circle.
It does.
And there's trash.
There's trash.
There's phones.
There's phones.
There's trespass. Probably somewhere.
They did a trash trip at the house.
See, there we go. So we got trespassing, and we have cell phone data, which we talked about at the very beginning with the Moscow murders. So
Yep.
What's the current event? What are we talking about?
We're talking about Rex Heuermann, which is the suspected Long Island serial killer.
I had no idea this even existed. This is what I get for not watching the news or paying attention to stuff, but this is actually fascinating stuff.
It is, and I didn't know it was a thing until he was arrested in the summer 2023 summer. But it's always fascinating when something like this happens 15 years later, and how they tracked down a suspected killer.
So give us an overview of the case.
Okay. So Rex has been indicted for 3 murders right now, and he's the prime suspect in a 4th murder. So essentially, he's alleged to have committed these murders in 2009 and 2010. I think it was around 2010, Long Island law enforcement ended up finding essentially a grave.
Okay.
Of, I think it was 11 bodies total. And they have linked 4 of them together that they call I think Long Island 4, or their
Is it Gilgo or
Gilgo 4? Yep, Gilgo 4. And they've been referring to these 4 victims as a group due to the relationship that they appear to have to one another.
Okay. Which
is the similarities between these victims' bodies and the investigations so far that they've connected is they're all women between the age of 22 to 27, sex workers. They all had missing clothing and missing personal items. All of them had recent contact with a burner phone. And all of the deaths were by homicide. And 2 of the 4 victims' phones were used after they were killed.
Oh, okay. And so they've arrested Rex Heuermann, charged him with 3 or 4 counts of...
3 counts so far, but he's the prime suspect in the 4th.
And there's like a total of 11 bodies that I'm sure they'll keep working on. Okay. So what does this have to do? What's the juicy details that flow into what we're going to talk about today?
So it's how they arrested him or came to know of Rex Heuermann and his alleged criminal behaviors.
Murders.
Yeah.
All right, break it down. Break it down.
These cases had since they found the bodies, they've been cold. And
sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Dad joke.
The cases have been cold, but in January of 2022, they created a task force of several different law enforcement agencies, and they decided to re-go through all of the evidence that they'd collected from all of the disappearance of these women and everything that they have found from the bodies and whatnot. Interestingly, within 2 months, his name came up for the first time ever once they had this task force. And it was due to a connection to a first-generation Chevy Avalanche. And I don't remember the exact details, but there was something about like the back of the car that was different, or it had some sort of add-on or whatever. Mm-hmm. And some witness to one of the disappearances had told law enforcement 12 years ago that this Chevy Avalanche was who he suspected the victim had left with the last time. So they figure out there's this first generation Chevy Avalanche that was registered to him at the time of the murders, and that is how they initiated the investigation.
So that's how they had that initial connection and then started piecing it together from there.
So they knew that all of these victims had communications with a burner phone right before they died.
What's a burner phone?
A burner phone is a phone that is set up to be an anonymous phone, to not link back to the individual that's using it, essentially. And so they ended up making connections between Rex and these burner phones that the victims had communications with. And he is alleged to have called taunting family members over the years.
That doesn't ever help you get away with anything.
It is so creepy.
Yeah.
So creepy.
Well, when you get into the details of this case, it's creepy as hell.
Yeah. So one of the victims specifically, he has taunted the sister, including after he allegedly killed her, took her phone, was calling the sister, told the sister that he had killed her sister, made several different phone calls within like a week of her murder, and continued to taunt her over the years. Yeah.
Wow.
But so the connections that they made between the burner phones and his phone are really interesting to me, because we've talked about in the Moscow murder the cell tower problems, especially in Moscow, Idaho. One thing we talked about was there's only 2 local cell towers.
Right.
So how indicative is it really that his phone is pinging?
And it kind of, I mean, when we were reading through the complaint, there was a lot of in the general areas, even in this case, in the area, New York, Long Island, I'm guessing there's a ton of people, a lot of activity. So in the area, I'm sitting there rolling my eyes. Ooh, good one.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that separates this case from the Moscow case, though, is that they were able to track both his cellular device and the burner's device. Mm-hmm. He works in Manhattan and he lived in Long Island. So they were able to show slightly in the criminal complaint that when one phone moved, so did the other.
Oops.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about burner phones in depth with Dope Yoda here in a bit, but so that's not helpful for him. What about, we have our favorite topic in this case.
Yeah, we do.
Trash rips.
Trash rips.
Do tell.
So, they did have DNA on these bodies, so of course he's been a suspect since they identified him with the Chevy, and then they did all of the interweb investigation.
Here's one thing I will say. They did a very good job of, law enforcement in general could take a note from these guys, because and gals, there's always that guy. Law enforcement did a really good job in this case of actually going and getting records from cell phone providers, from web providers, from businesses, from credit card companies, put together a case before they even started down these other avenues, which is incredibly important and helpful in these cases.
And they are able to, with all of the investigation that they did, they are able to actually make real connections between this burner phone, the burner email, and like the information he's using on the burner phone directly to him.
Tinder profiles.
Andy Roberts. That'll get you.
Tinder will get you.
So, yeah, some of the interesting things, they had records of the wife's flights.
Yep.
And she was out of town for 3 of the disappearances.
So old boy's married.
He is married.
When wife's away.
Yep.
Okay.
And they got all of his personal, not burner phone records. His cell phone was always at home during the murders.
Oh.
Which is interesting, too.
Okay.
He tried, allegedly.
Allegedly.
But the trash rip. So there was a female hair on all of the victims, 3 of the victims.
Female hair?
Female hair that did not belong to the victims. They did a trash rip in July 21, 2022 at Rex Heuermann's house. And they were able to connect the female hairs to Rex's wife. Oh, yeah. Which is interesting altogether. There's no allegations that she had any knowledge or that she was involved, but goes to show that your DNA can show up at a crime scene.
Well, that's going to be traced. That's transfer evidence is what that would be.
Yep.
Okay.
But March of 2023, they had him surveilled at this point. They've been watching him for a year, and he walks out of his Manhattan office with a box of pizza and throws it away in a public trash can and continues to walk. FBI agents run over, grab it out of the trash, and they were able to compare the DNA, some DNA that was found on victims and the DNA that they found on this pizza crust to connect him.
Do these alleged murderers not watch CSI?
He does.
Boy, not very well.
Well, that's true, but he's also allegedly hasn't committed a murder since 2010.
I mean,
He did a pretty good job.
no.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, I mean, once it starts to unravel, it starts to unravel, but his name wasn't talked about by
So-
law enforcement.
Lesson number 1: eat your crust, kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Throw it away in your office, idiot.
So dumb. Well, and we'll get into that with Dope Yoda about public trash versus private trash. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And then when you're discarding something like that, we actually Iowa Supreme Court last year, I want to say, had a big case came down on discarded materials with DNA.
Yeah.
That case was a straw.
Yep.
And in Iowa, you throw it away, CSI gets to get it.
And it's certainly busy street in New York. You just throw away a pizza box. If they want it, that's going to be obvious.
Yeah. Okay.
It is also interesting, too. They did do the trash rip at his residence, but I don't think that they got her DNA.
Right. Not his.
Not his. So
This is gonna be an interesting one to follow.
yeah.
The great thing about it is it absolutely sets up what we're going to talk about next.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
With the Dope Yoda.
Yep.
Because we're going to get an update on trash rips.
Yep.
We're going to talk about the concept of trespass.
Yep.
And then he's going to drop the Dope Yoda knowledge about burner phones.
I'm excited.
And we're not going to promote burner phones, but they do have a legitimate use.
They do.
And a legitimate privacy protection that he's going to be able to explain to us here in a hot second.
And there's some fatal faults that people think that they're being sly about, and not so much.
The burner blunders.
The burner blunders. All right.
All right. Well, does that tell us what we need to know about the Huberman and set up perfectly? We're teed up
It does.
for the Dope Yoda.
It does.
All right.
We might have to follow this guy because it is an interesting legal case, but he's probably gonna go to prison. I'm gonna guess.
Well, we'll see. We have 2 to follow the whole time. We have Moscow, which involve phones, cell towers, trash. There's trash. See,
This is how it's getting done.
we're not saying that people could learn something from this podcast, but we're saying people could learn something from this podcast.
Good.
All right.